I'm actually, Anthony, I'm going to start with you because I know you are 50 and a little weeny bit. Until virtually the other day, still riding, still intending to ride, and you had that horrible guillotine moment in a way, didn't you, where coming back from injury, you're pretty much told, actually, this isn't going to work. How was that to take?
Yeah, it's been hard and still struggling. And sorry, but I'm going to be a bit emotional in the beginning, but I'll get better.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been very difficult. It's been almost 2 years. And I was at the peak of my racing. I was a champion jockey the year before, leading the log by 30 winners. And all of a sudden, it just cut short from one accident, one false mistake, one wrong judgment in a race. And that was the end of my career.
But you, I mean, obviously you didn't know at the time that was the end. You had a whole rehabilitation program to go through with what you thought was the goal in end. I mean, even that rehabilitation program, what was that like?
It was very difficult because after my accident, I couldn't even lift a spoon. I lost total strength in my body. So I had to start with OT, starting to touch my fingers because it was that bad. And all I wanted was the hope to be able to get back there. It's the only thing you know to do. So, yeah.
So it's the hope that's driving you on until
Well,
the point at which...
Yes, and I was adamant I was going to get back. I went to gym and started to train and get hot and buy kinetist and determined to get back, although at the back of my mind, there was something telling me, you're not going to get back again. There was someone telling me, and for the first time, I knew this was serious.
But when you say, this is interesting, you say there was someone telling you, the fact is it was someone up here, wasn't it, in the back of your head?
Yes.
Rather than perhaps a support team to turn to.
Yes, it was. It was at the back of my head, but it was my determination more than anything that wanted me to get out there. And the doctor even said to me, he says, Anthony, I think you must call it a day. I don't think it's advisable. So I said to the doctor, I want to be convinced myself that I can't do it again. So I went back to training. I got myself fit. I went back to riding work. I rode work the first morning and I came off. I was okay. The next day I rode. I felt like I was going to pass out. I've got burning pains running down my legs, which I've still got nerve pains. And I went back to my neurosurgeon and they did test and they said no. He said for his sake and his mind that he believes that I must call it a day. So,
right.
And I had to take his decision, and which was very, very difficult because this is the only thing you know what to do.
Well, and you did it to great effect for 30 years. Over the course of that time, there must have been other injuries. You must have had to fight back through other problems, injuries, and again, presumably, essentially doing it on your own.
Yes, that's the problem. Everything you had to do as a jockey, you did on your own. We never had a system that we went through in this country, in South Africa. And yeah, you had to do it on your own. And you never liked to take anything back home neither to talk to other people. So it was all mentally, you had to be mentally strong and mentally to want to get back on that horse, because it's also a nerve thing to get back on a horse after an accident like that. You're scared or you're going to fall again, and you can't afford to be scared, because if you're scared, you can't get back on.
Well, this is where the sort of fairy tale and reality sort of collide horribly, possibly, Michelle, because look at the movie and you're back on the horse after a similar story, months of rehabilitation from a position, again, where you couldn't lift a spoon either, you couldn't do anything. Yeah. How much of a misconception are we given, perhaps, about how difficult it is to get back on the horse, even?
Well, for me, firstly, it's heartbreaking to hear Anthony's story, because I've been in a position where it was, you know, could have been career-ending, but thankfully I've been able to make a full recovery and get back to riding. First one was as a 19-year-old when I fractured my skull and had to learn to walk again and all the rest of it, but I was fortunate enough to be able to, so it's heartbreaking to hear Anthony's story that this is completely different and by the smallest of margins. But yeah, I think that...
But you then got to rely on yourself, have you, really, to get back? I mean, obviously, you're not going to do, you need someone to do the physio, etc. But in terms of up here, you've got to work it out.
I think so, and I think like Anthony said, in the back of your mind, I even though I was being advised by the doctors not to return to riding after that, after fracturing my skull, that next time it could be worse and, you know, it could be fatal or it would be a worse injury. I think in the back of my mind, I was so determined and I knew that I could be okay after time. And it was a good 7 months before I was back riding, but I think probably a good 4 years before I was 100% mentally, because it slowed my brain down so much with the brain damage. But yeah, I think it is up to the individual with that determination. But like Anthony said, in Victoria we are lucky to have Racing Victoria have a program for support, but at that point, when I was 19, 15 years ago, sort of was a little bit, it wasn't as good as it is now, and I did go through that alone. Luckily, I did have a big family, but at the same time, it's still something that you do take on yourself personally, because you don't want to bring other people down by your life. So it is a very lonely time, but yeah, luckily for me, I was so determined to do something that I was passionate about, and that got me through.
I suppose also injury is the most acute example of people being able to say, right, you need help here. Looking at the job of a jockey, which is to get rides and win rides, basically, I can't imagine the sort of routines that you do day in, day out, relentlessly. I was saying that one of the features of Michelle's movie is the alarm clock bringing off at 3 a.m. and then 3 a.m. and 3 a.m. and you're chasing that all the time. It's relentless, Anthony. How do you deal with relentlessness? I mean, I noticed you were champion jockey with the highest record number of wins, 334 wins in a season.
Yes.
That's wins. Goodness knows how many rides that involves.
Yes, listen, you got to get up firstly in the morning, like 3 o'clock or 3:30, go to training. Sometimes you got showered at the training track, straight to the next track. You're going to travel, you got to get on the plane, so you never get home. Get home at 7:30 in the evening. And you never like to bring what happens to the races back home. And you don't have a family life. It's because the next morning is the same thing, unless you have an injury or suspension. That's the only time you really get to spend with your family.
I bet that's a lovely time to spend with the family, isn't it? Yeah.
I think that's the time you're actually more angry than anything else, so you want to get back there again. It is very difficult. It's mentally, we as sportsmen, we don't talk about our pressure. We keep it all inside. So you don't want other jockeys or other people to know that you've got that pressure, you're under that pressure. So it's all bottled up all the time, and I think it's part of the game, and we don't have that person that you can go and talk to. And I think racing, well, I hope it's getting to there where we got someone permanently there to advise a jockey to talk to, because I think it will make a huge difference. I think a sports psychologist in a jockey room will make a big difference to racing.
Right. I mean, again, issues of winning and defeat. Well, look, all sports people have to deal with defeat as well as they have to do with winning, but they don't have to deal with it necessarily on their own. So lose, drive to the next race, drive to the next day, whatever it is, in that lonely space, I guess, entirely having to work it out on your own with those thoughts of not performing, going round and round. How did you deal with that? You can't always be on top form.
No, it's obviously you have to develop a good mental strength, because on top of that you're exhausted, you're probably starving, you're thirsty, you're sleep deprived. So
I was going to say, are you awake?
Yeah, it's unbelievably exhausting. You can't even begin to imagine how tiring it is. I remember as an apprentice, now it's changed, riding 26 days straight, travelling somewhere between an hour and 4 hours in the car one way, so sometimes up to 6 or 7 hours. And yeah, you're basically, you're starving and you're sweating and you're thirsty, and then you're exhausted on top of it. And
well, look, sorry, just to interrupt you there. Look back then at the number of times that you pushed for that ride and you pushed for that ride and you pushed for that ride. could you look back on it and think, well, knowing what I know now and how much I achieved, I would have been a bit more forgiving to myself, actually? Or would you, or is it just that's what you got to do?
It's actually, I think it's what you have to do. If you want to succeed, unfortunately, you have to push yourself to the limit. And because if you're not there to ride that horse, somebody else gets the ride, that horse goes to Melbourne, that horse wins, you're not there. It's just a relentless game. From my perspective, I think it could be helped by having maybe somebody there to drive you to the races, to drive you home, give you that tiny bit of a leeway to have a sleep without any hassle. Somebody that's just there, they don't speak to you, you just jump in the car, you get home. That would make an unbelievable difference to a lot of jockeys. And I think also having somebody as a coach in the jockeys room, like Anthony was saying about a sports psychologist, or even having an ex-jockey who's been there, done that, can speak to you about the highs and lows. You come back in, watch the race with them, explain, what happened. It could relieve a lot of pressure. Very small things that could make a really big difference.
Can I ask you, Anthony, did you ever, and if so, how often, ride knowing that you were concussed? Or
Actually, remember one day I fell in Hong Kong. I was so dehydrated, I broke my collarbone, so I was passed out firstly, and the first thing I woke up in the ambulance and I was saying, please give me some water, please give me some water. I was so dehydrated, and it just shows you're so mentally, you've got to be so mentally strong, because your body is almost given up underneath you, but you have to make that weight. And you don't make that weight, somebody else is going to ride the horse and the horse might win. So it's those things that you put your body through sometimes is...
And that dividing line between being mentally strong and being tipped over an edge, in a sense, is very, very thin, isn't it? And presumably there were times when, frankly, you, like we heard from some of the others, you went through periods of depression?
Yeah, I'm taking a lot of strain now, especially.
Yeah, we see that.
I think you bottle it all inside, so you don't show it, and you don't want people to see your weaknesses, because you can't afford to show your weaknesses in races, because people will take advantage of it. So you always keep everything inside, and I think with mine, I've kept it all inside, and now that it's finished, and now it's all coming out.
And it's coming out at a time of sort of forced transition, let's put it that way. Michelle, you have what I would guess in racing terms is just about the most perfectly managed transition, actually, into you know what you want to do, and that's still all around horses, and it's training, and you're doing it, and you haven't had to give up riding yet, you're still doing that as well. So you've got pretty much a perfect balance as you move forward. But how hard even has that been to realize that your riding days are gradually going now?
It is hard. I recognised from a young age, young as 21, that I'd had a lot of injuries by that stage, fractured vertebrae and a fractured skull and dislocated ankle, and I thought at some point I'm going to have to move on to something else. But racing was my absolute passion, and I was so devoted to being the best jockey I could and devoted my life to it. But I thought at some point this was going to have to end, and I knew I'd be depressed having to leave, what I loved doing. So I recognised that early and decided that training was the next best thing. And I set in place some plans for the future to start training. I travelled around the world, worked for some of the best trainers in the world, Aidan O'Brien, Cricket Head, Luca Kamani, and then bought a farm where I'm training from now and set that up. And in the time while I was still riding, so that was in place. But I think I was lucky enough to recognise that from a young age that I had to do that. Whereas I know there's a lot of jockeys that have no idea what they're going to do when they're finished riding. So yeah, I wouldn't say it's been an easy transition, and I'm still currently riding with the dual licence that's been brought in with Racing Victoria, which is a great initiative to give you that transition period of slowly weaning myself off riding. But it's scary to think that that's going to soon end. It's something that, it's an adrenaline rush that you can't really explain. That all that pressure is on you, and that split-second decision, and all the training, and that mental battle to get to the race. So yeah, it's a scary thought to think that's going to be finished soon, but yeah, I'm lucky to have a job now that I'm training and getting that same buzz out of watching the horses that I train go out there and race without me. So I
you've
think
worked out your transition and how you're going to do and what you want to do. I mean, there are other sports. I would think particularly, for example, of rugby, but it's increasingly in football, in soccer, and in many other sports where there is now an acknowledgement of the need for a sort of education program for transitioning. What do you do after your career? Anthony, have you ever seen the light of one of those?
Yes, actually, the sad part is at the moment racing in South Africa, there's such a negative vibe at the moment, which is stopping me from doing so many things that I'd like to do. And, you know, we need the people to have like more positive about racing. And that's, I think it's stopped me from really getting back to do anything with racing. So I've bought into a restaurant and I'm now something to keep me busy, because sitting at home and doing nothing was starting to drive me crazy. And I had to start doing something, and I'm very lucky because my friend, a very good friend, he owned it, and he said, "Come on, I can see. Come with me and come join me." And yeah, I'm enjoying it, but it's not my passion. It's not what I want to do. Something I really love is the horses, and I think that's the place that I'm going to end up.
Right, it's got to find that path at the moment. Look, I'm going to call a halt there. Thank you very much indeed for that. That's really valuable insight and for being very frank as well. Victoria, I'm going to pass the baton back to you,
Okay.
and then we'll expand onto the panel session in due course.
Sounds great. Thank you.